Last year brought us plenty of superhero films, some that blew us away and others that didn't quite hit the mark. Today we're diving into something a little different. We've got the top 12 noir superhero movies where heroism meets cynicism and things take a turn for the dark. Some of these choices might surprise you, but stick around and we'll show you why they belong on this list. Before we get too deep into it though, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Watchmen, 2009. If legendary filmmaker Christopher Nolan said that this film is way ahead of his time, then we're going to believe him over all the criticism it's received. This one's an adaptation of Alan Moore's beloved graphic novel. Moore, who has grown used to various badly altered adaptations of his beloved creations himself, refuses to watch it and has declared that it will be a disappointment. The amount of inconsistencies the pre-production of this film has suffered through is way more than the time it took for the world to reject it. It kept getting delayed and postponed from the 90s to the 2000s, and when the script was finally ready, the casting process was all over the place. From faces like Tom Cruise, Keanu Reeves, and even Natalie Portman being suggested for various roles, well, none of them joined. The final casting involved actors like Patrick Wilson, Jeffrey Morgan, and Jackie Haley, who, by the way, actively sought the role, even making a DIY Rorschach mask and creating an audition tape in his kitchen. The story is about a group of superheroes called the Watchmen who were forced to retire at one point, and now one of their team members, spoiler, the comedian, has been murdered, prompting them to begin an investigation which reveals many dark details of the alternate world that they live in. The film is a grim representation of a selfish society that needs a villain to appreciate the heroes. It showcases morally ambiguous characters, their sacrifice for the greater good of this greedy world, and most importantly, the collateral damage caused by such acts. It was a good film released in a bad time when the world wasn't head over heels for superheroes as it is now. I mean, it's not like today where every other person has a favorite superhero. Max Payne, 2008. A sad reality of today's world is that everything is compared to everything. Being a popular video game adaptation, it was inevitable that video game enthusiasts were going to judge this film pretty harshly, and that's exactly what happened. Many people didn't like the film because it didn't match the video game standards, but let's just forget about the game for a second and look at it as a superhero movie. It stars Mark Wahlberg as Max Payne, an NYPD detective who is desperately trying to find the killer behind the brutal murder of his wife and daughter. During his search, Max stumbles upon a dark conspiracy that involves a drug called Valkyr, which is produced by a company in an attempt to create superhero soldiers. He also finds out that this drug is linked to the murder of his family. Despite its flaws, the film is still packed with action sequences with plenty of guns and combat that we adore. The gloomy, engaging, and cold setting of the film reflects a sense of sadness that fits perfectly with the plot. Some video gamers liked the film and had no problem with it diverting from the games, while others expressed their utter disappointment. I guess to each their own is a better way to make sense of it. The Batman, 2022. Who would have thought that the teenage heartthrob Edward Cullen, or might we say Robert Pattinson, would be playing the deep-voiced and serious-looking fellow with the overhead mask? We seriously had our fingers crossed for this one, and we're glad that the recent Batman film won hearts and maintained the love for grimdark among the fans. The film focuses on the early days of Batman's career, where he's just a freshie with only 2 years of vigilante experience on his resume. He goes against the Riddler while also dealing with some other villains, including the Penguin. As he's still new to the game, the authorities, as well as the population of Gotham City, are quite skeptical about his abilities and intentions. He's not alone though, as Lieutenant Jim Gordon believes in him, despite his police department thinking otherwise. The film focuses more on Batman's detective aspects rather than the superhero action stuff, which has been repeated several times. It shows how Batman gained his reputation as the superhero of Gotham City by restoring hope even in the darkest of times. The film did pretty well and even became the 7th highest grossing movie of the year, 2022, which explains why it's on this list.
Everywhere around you.
The Shadow, 1994. Here is yet another underrated movie that you probably avoided because of the lack of hype around it. The Shadow tries to mimic the Batman universe in creating its superhero, the Shadow, played by a much younger Alec Baldwin. The man behind this superhero, Lamont Cranston, gets kidnapped by a powerful Tibetan man named Tulku, who insists on teaching Cranston his magical ways. After some denial, Cranston agrees and learns various dark arts like hypnotism, which helps him fight crime when he returns to New York City 7 years later. Back home, he continues living as a rich playboy while secretly working as the Shadow and saving people whom he then employs as his agents. The big evil arrives in the form of Shawan Khan, who turns out to be the last descendant of Genghis Khan and aims to fulfill his ancestors' dream of world domination. Oh, and he's also a rogue protege of Cranston's master, Tulku. John Lone indeed does a remarkable job of portraying this cynical villain. Although the film had great potential, it became a huge flop at the box office, mostly due to the most outstanding films of that time releasing pretty near to it. Films like The Lion King, The Mask, Forrest Gump, and even True Lies overshadowed the release of The Shadow. The Crow, 1994. I guess there's no need to justify why this film is mentioned on the list. It's gained a cult-like following over the years, resulting in the release of its 3 sequels, which failed to match the reputation of the original. After all, it had Brandon Lee playing the role of the protagonist, Eric Draven. A reboot of the film was also released last year, but it was a commercial failure, with reviews that mostly veered negative. The film focuses on Eric Draven, who helplessly witnesses his fiancée get assaulted and murdered by a group of disgusting men. Eric is then shot and thrown out of his apartment window. According to legend, the crows that carry souls to the other side can allow a restless spirit to resurrect in unjust circumstances, and that's exactly what happens to Eric, who comes back with invincible powers. Now guided by the crow, Eric sets off to avenge his fiancée's murder. The movie is also associated with the tragic death of the young star who, similar to his father Bruce Lee, left the world too young. During filming, Brandon Lee was badly wounded by a prop gun and succumbed to his injuries at the age of only 28. Most of the scenes had already been shot and the remaining few were completed using a stunt double. Lee's performance was widely praised along with all the action sequences, making the film rank highly among superhero films. Darkman, 1990. The cherished action hero, Liam Neeson, came to prominence with his first superhero role in this film, which was a commercial blast, grossing $34 million above its budget. Neeson plays a scientist named Payne Westlake who is left brutally wounded and disfigured after a bunch of goons led by a powerful mobster, Robert Durant, blow up his lab while searching for some incriminating documents. Before this tragic incident, Payne was on his way to succeeding in his research on synthetic skin that would have helped burn victims with reconstructive surgery. This technique was left in the developing stage where it can help Payne take the face of whoever he wants, but it disintegrates under 99 minutes of being exposed to sunlight. To add to the troubles, Payne's girlfriend Julie has found the incriminating documents, making herself a target for the mobster. Payne now uses his ability to change faces so that he can track Robert Durant down and take his revenge. As a side effect of using the technique, Payne suffers from intense rage and psychosis, making him sometimes as dangerous as the villains he chases. Before he directed the super hit trilogy of Spider-Man, Sam Raimi introduced us to Darkman, which was followed up by 2 sequels, various novels, comic books, and even a couple video games. It would be amazing if they could pull off a reboot of this masterpiece amidst the modern craze of superhero films. Unbreakable, 2000. M. Night Shyamalan is famous for directing the most intense and mind-bending films full of twists and unexpected endings. After the release of his breakthrough psychological thriller, The Sixth Sense, Shyamalan came up with yet another work of brilliance known as Unbreakable. So there's a man named Elijah Price who was born with a rare condition that makes his bones extremely fragile, so much so that he can't even walk properly. Now, as he grows up, he becomes obsessed with comic books and gets convinced that if he is the weak one, there must exist a counterpart who would be unbreakable. He goes to extreme measures in his search for this supposed superhero and finds a man named David Dunn who is the sole survivor of a train accident that killed 131 passengers. David has no idea about these so-called powers, but Elijah convinces him to explore his limits. Soon, David realizes that Elijah is actually right. David rarely gets sick. He was able to save his son during a car accident by ripping the door apart, and he can even see visions of people's wrong deeds once they touch him. David starts to use his powers to prevent crime and soon finds out that Elijah was behind the train wreck that killed so many people, along with other incidents, just to find David. Elijah declares himself to be the villain of this real-life comic book, naming himself Glass before being sent to a psychiatric hospital. Although the film performed averagely at the box office, it soon gained a cult following and went on to release two sequels, 2017's Split and 2019's Glass, both starring James McAvoy in the lead role. Batman Returns, 1992. After the success of the original Batman, Warner Bros. Was ready to roll out the next chapter in the saga, but there was one problem. Tim Burton wasn't keen on returning. He felt he had already said everything he wanted to with his first film. So, Warner Bros. Took a different approach. They convinced Burton to forget about the whole Batman legacy and just make a Tim Burton movie. The result? A wild, unforgettable ride packed with some of the most complex characters in superhero cinema. We've got Oswald Cobblepot, better known as the Penguin, a wealthy kid abandoned by his parents because of his deformities. He's raised by a family of penguins in the sewers, yes, that's right, and grows up to seek revenge on Gotham, aiming to become a powerful socialite. Then there's Max Schreck, a greedy industrialist who teams up with the Penguin to spread corruption and take over the city. Enter Selina Kyle, Max's secretary. She uncovers their evil plan, but Max throws her out of a window to keep her quiet. She survives and returns as the vengeful and unpredictable Catwoman. Now, Batman has his hands full, facing three enemies with three very different agendas. The real magic of this film lies in its cast. Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Christopher Walken bring these characters to life in ways that are both haunting and iconic. Despite the dark and grim atmosphere, the film doesn't shy away from humor, which makes it even more entertaining. Constantine, 2005. Where do we even start with this one? It has an exceptional cast of famous faces like Keanu Reeves, Rachel Weisz, Tilda Swinton, Peter Stormare, and many more. Keanu Reeves plays John Constantine, who was born with the ability to see and communicate with demons and angels in their true form. This turned out to be a curse for young John, as he wasn't able to take it in and tried to end his life when he was a teenager. John spent some time in hell before he was revived, but due to the sin of taking a life, he has now been condemned to go to hell when he eventually dies for real. As an adult, he now uses this ability to exorcise and save souls in hopes of redeeming his way into heaven. Things only get complicated for him as he is sought out by Detective Dodson, who is investigating the mysterious suicide of her twin sister, Isabel. John finds that Isabel is in hell, and to make things worse, there's this grand plan that the evil forces are planning to bring Mammon, Satan's son, into the human world, which is obviously going to be a huge problem. This is how this cynical chain-smoker guy turns into a hero who tries to save the world through his powers. The great acting, intense plot, and astonishing visuals of this film take you to hell and back, where you witness one of the best portrayals of Lucifer in live action by Peter Stormare. Logan, 2017. This is one of the saddest films to ever exist in the superhero genre, and you can't prove us wrong on this. If you grew up with the X-Men franchise, adoring the characters and cheering for their trials and tribulations, you must have hated and loved this film at the same time. Everyone nice basically dies in this one. Charles Xavier, the family that gives the hero shelter, Caliban, and most tragically of all, Logan himself. He's gone through his fair share of sacrifices in the past, and to see him leave like this was beyond heartbreaking. Cut to Deadpool technically reviving Logan in his insane universe. This film feels like the retirement version of the original X-Men trilogy that used to be eventful and filled with action. In this one, Logan has grown older, his healing has slowed down substantially, and he drinks a lot and works as a limo driver while taking care of Professor X, who suffers uncontrollable psychic seizures. His retired superhero life is interrupted by Gabriella, who asks him to help protect a young girl, Laura, who is a genetically engineered mutant created using Logan's DNA. Laura, along with a bunch of other mutant kids, has escaped the Transigen facility but is still being hunted down. So, in the end, all the adults get killed while either protecting these kids or chasing them. And watch closely, because some of these mutant kids might end up becoming the face of a new installment in the ever-expanding X-Men franchise. Punisher, Warzone, 2008. Hidden in the shadows of famous superhero flicks from 2008 like Batman, Hulk, and Iron Man, there is another movie that isn't talked about as much. This film features Ray Stevenson, who plays the role of Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. After losing his family due to mob violence, Frank has sworn to rid New York City of all criminals. He's brutally violent in his killings and doesn't spare anybody. During one of his escapades, he throws a mob boss, Russotti, into a glass-crushing machine, which leaves his face disfigured. Russotti soon acquires the name Jigsaw and teams up with his insane brother, Looney Bin Jim, to seek revenge on the Punisher. On the other hand, the Punisher has accidentally killed an innocent undercover agent and now contemplates retiring from his anti-hero duties. The film received average ratings as some found it disgusting with outdated dialogue, while others loved the action-packed sequences that didn't shy away from showcasing violence. Dick Tracy, 1990. Did you know that this Disney film is the third sequel of the already released comic books? No wonder we felt like we were missing something. It doesn't indulge the origin of the character and continues with the next chapter after the second comic sequel. The film focuses on the titular hero as he goes against the gangster named Big Boy and many other weird-looking villains. There's also this nightclub singer, Breathless Mahoney, who tries to seduce Tracy and succeeds despite him being in a relationship with a kind woman, Tess Trueheart. It's indeed a bizarre world with a lot of bizarre names. The film puts together multiple facets of brilliance, like the old-school visual effects, the music, and most impressively of all, the makeup and costuming of these hideous villains. It features a talented cast of Al Pacino, Warren Beatty, Glenn Headey, and Madonna. Al Pacino was even nominated for Oscars for his portrayal of Big Boy. The film garnered a reputed position in the superhero universe, making its way into this video. Marvelous verdict! That was our list of the top superhero films, and as we all know, the term best is incredibly subjective, so feel free to let us know in the comments below which among these films you believe shouldn't have been included here, as well as any that we might have missed out on. That's all for now, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.